away.
Bonjour.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. I have a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know whether it's going to show up on the screen. In favor of a new kind of geography. I'm talking about passing on our knowledge. As a teacher, I was taught that I always need to speak longer than the previous speaker. Well, it's going to be difficult because nobody spoke before me. So I'm going to try and simplify things. But I'm going to say things in a very simple way because they're obvious. So it's only easy to do. So when we're talking about a new kind of geography or new geography, the formulation will be very simple. I'm going to try and explain how geography has lost its ground, its basis. Do I have to signal when I want a new slide to appear?
La géographie a perdu son sol.
So let's start here. This is a geography manual, a current one compared to a manual of geography of the 60s. Well, not much has changed, actually, and the epistemological bases have not changed. You have France on both sides, but there are two worlds apart. Maurice Lelanou, this is a geography which shows the geographical personality of France, part of Europe. The mountains, the structure, the climate, and the different elements. Now, first of all, you have the ground that is described in its geological matter. That's the map you have in front of you. Learned about the rivers, the mountain ranges, the geological formations, the names of the different regions. For example, who can talk about the different regions in France today by their names? Well, this is something we used to learn, not anymore today. So this is, on the right-hand side, an extract of a manual of 2019. And we went from a geography based on the ground, the physical matter, to a geography that is kind of a science of space. Not space as in outer space, but space on the ground. So it is structured by different points of focus and different flows. And the program of a year in school, of a first grade, is the Dynamique d'un monde en recommencé, a world in recombination and the different flows. On the left-hand side, you have a map that is static with a vertical point of view. We look at the ground and see how human societies use it. And on the right-hand side, you see the flows, the arrows, and we look at how the different parts interact with the other spaces and neighboring countries. And you take any map of France, a physical map of France, and you have something that exists because there are colors that reflect the geographical formations. On the right-hand side, if you're not on one of the lines showing all the flows or a metropole, there's no physical existence. You see the white space. You seem to have only those that are on a train line or in a metropole that exist on the map. So let's carry on with a comparison. In the first chapter, the region of the north of France, let's look at a region. On the left-hand side, it talks about the fundamentals of nature and history, and we look at a transection, geological transection, and superimposed with a map of the different curves, level, the vegetation. And on the right-hand side, you have loss of geographical knowledge that is just tremendous. No pupils today in high school or even in university can describe the different forms or different geological specific elements, erosion or any kind of climates. To such an extent that my colleagues in the field of geography said they have students today who've become very good in the digital approach of space, but are more able to spot a wheat field through digital detection. rather than seeing it in real life and recognizing it in details. Now, how many students can recognize a type of rock or a type of soil and can name them? So there's a tremendous loss of geographical knowledge. And on the right-hand side, you see the summary of a manual on rural spaces. I'm not going to mention the publisher. It doesn't really matter. But you can see here how rural spaces are classified according to their degree of integration in globalization. So the type of geography that is taught today seems to be, how can I put it? Well, in a more complex way, is a geography of economic globalization. It's a geography of capitalism. And this triggered criticisms of geographers of Marxist inspiration. But the common element is that this is a geography that is based on spaces. And on the other side, there's a science of spaces with its laws and its flows. French geography, in the past, geographers had or felt uneasy when they spoke to historians because geography wasn't as well considered as history. It was very fine to describe places and climates and all of that. But the whole effort the geographers put in was to make geography as an autonomous science. Martin obtained this qualification in 1943 to depart from historians. When you read historians like Bloch, like Fur, and others, they have a lot of sympathy and interest for geography, but they seem to consider it as not an independent science because it has not much of a power for explaining things, and it's not good at generalizing. So we could wonder, does architecture have a ground? Is it based in something? Since it is practiced in the 70s in a different way, I'm going to talk about the tipping point of the 70s. Now, is this geography part and parcel of our understanding of space, or don't we take into account the ground and its complexities? Two arguments. Until the end of the 18th century, when town planners planned a city, the first thing that they thought about was to say that a city has a subsoil. You start by describing the subsoil. This is something that, when you think of a city, we don't think about caves, about soils, about quarries. We just think about a flat surface covered in buildings. Second thing, I think there's a focus with ecological matters with its desire to regenerate neighborhoods, if I'm not the best place to do so, but they look at places that are former industrial wastelands, and by doing away with any trace of previous occupation and human occupation. There are other examples. What you have in front of you here is the perfect example. You have also the Renault industrial site in Boulogne-Billancourt, Paris on the island. Then the only thing that couldn't be done away with is the entry to the Renault industrial site, where the portal where all of the speeches were given of the trade unionists. Anyway, there's a matrix that we're familiar with as historians of the environment, but this is an idea that we got from the U.S. It's how we can conceive a Garden of Eden and the wilderness there. And when technology came into this Garden of Eden to redo this in an ecological way, we have to do away with all of those hints to technology. So it's a way of doing away with the past and doing away with all the assemblies and the complex sedimented history in which the presence of humans in their diversity has interacted with the location. There's a lack of sensibility in geography, and this goes to show how insensitive we are to, the ecology today. What happened in the 70s? Why did geography change then in the 70s to become a science of space that can be analyzed using mathematical rules. Well, the first one, there's a desire to go along with modernization. This is a text, the first text saying we need to separate things, because on the one hand, there's the old geography, the old style geography, and physical geography, human geography. We always started teaching physical geography, and then there was human geography, and the combination between the two didn't really work. I will explain why. But what was done in the 70s, was just saying there's the old geography, the traditional geography, that is slowly being replaced by a new geography that understands space as a system, that uses computers, and that is a geography of modernity and regional planification. Why? Because in the 70s they started building metropolises, highways. They needed to modernize things, that they needed to do away with the geographical complexity of the ground. And they wanted to make it all very mathematical. Look at just the spaces. So having it full of history and understanding of regional cultures is not something that the first, or the traditional geography, was eliminated in the 70s. And physical geography is not going to be taught anymore. We're a very conservative country, so it's going to start disappearing in the 70s, and it's little by little it fell by the wayside. And today it has lost its clout. It's no longer taught. And then it's the desire for modernization. We have to come back to the desire for France to modernize itself. Not only France, actually, but there was a larger modernization project shared by different countries. France was a country that has lost its international influence and was exhausted after the war. And it's interesting to read what was published after the war. Here we have a text by Edgar Morin, the initiator of systemic thought and the initiator of ecological thinking. In the 60s, he was the one that led an investigation or an opinion poll by CNRS. And Mandra said a century-long civilization of peasants is disappearing in France, but before it disappears completely, we're going to take an opinion poll, carry out an opinion poll, and ask people before it disappears. So they spot a few villages and one in Brittany. They spotted one in Brittany, and they sent out 200 scientists and started measuring, for example, taking people's, measuring their skull, taking blood tests, and looking at the shape of their hips, and then all sorts of crazy things, and then send in anthropologists. And Morin, as a result of this investigation, he spoke in favor of the youth against the traditional society, and even said that women were the secret agents of modernity. He said we have to decolonize our countryside, and we have to tear away the inhabitants from the soil. When we will have managed to separate the homes from the soil, we will manage our modernization. He analyzes the youth starting to use makeup and nail polish, and he thought that was a fantastic weapon for transformation, because women don't like to have dirty hands anymore. Peasant women like to polish their nails and all of that, and they like to look good, and they don't want to be seen as dirty anymore, as peasants anymore. So that's deeply rooted, and that's why it was a tipping point. This text was published in 1967, the text by Edgar Morin. In 1975, Pierre-Jacques Esselias describes Le Cheval d'Orgueil and describes the peasant civilization dwindling and disappearing. He even writes it in the language of Brittany. And then Laurent Ladurie describes a typical village after the Inquisition between 1380 1387 and 1380-something, and the creation of the Conservatory of the Coastline in 1875. So you have Le Roi Ladurie, that speaks to the French, Georges Dury and Pierre-Jacques Esselias, and Pierre Duby and Jacques Esselias say, the peasants in Brittany are the same as the peasants in the Middle Ages. They're just the same. Nothing has changed. So we're saying that we're losing this civilization that is related to the region, the ground, the soil, and we need to protect things to modernize. The data are those in France who are responsible for mapping, and they're saying, well, since we modernize things, we have to keep little plots as they used to be. There seemed to be a change and a model disappeared. Why soil and humankind were linked? There were two ways of integration for the so-called Vidalian geography. There's the image of a nation. Vidal de la Blache says, for long centuries, humans led a local life related to the ground. There's something permanent and settled. In other words, the integration of the French nation, the French Republic, the soil was important. It was what fed humankind, and in its diversity, there was the French nation that was there. And if you listen at the speech given by Emmanuel Macron, he said exactly the same thing. He said the French identity, it is rooted in our stones, in the ground, and all that, and it's centuries old, and the same as Vidal de la Blache said many decades before. So you see why things changed. Secondly, the geography at the time was quite boring. Tables and all that, tables for every region. You look at a typical map here. Chapter 4, the northern region. Chapter 5, the northeastern region. Chapter 6, the Paris region, blah, 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 and it went on, chapter after chapter. So quite obviously, the geography was no longer considered as interesting or exciting, and there's no longer geography is no longer taught at the Collège de France. There were no more lectures about geography, as if it was not useful for us to know about our territory, the ground. And at the Faculty of Political Sciences, there's no geography as part of the curriculum. So, what to do about it? If we look at mathematics or life sciences, you generally draw up a list of problems. So the unsolved mathematical problems, a list of 100 that is not yet known. But this is not something that is done in social sciences or human sciences, and there's a problem that is unsolved since the end of the 19th century, is how can we bring together in one single science a territory and human societies, and why doesn't it work? Well, if you take a territory, you have an infinity of human societies. There's no direct connection between the ground and a type of inhabitants. The Italians called it a possibilism, quote unquote. So there's no correlation or causality between the inhabitants and the type of ground, and that's the same problem we have today when we talk about the answer to be given to global warming. We're told to adapt, but no society was adapted to its environment. No society was or decided how to dress, what to eat, how to live because of its environment or the soil or the ground or the climate. No. So supposedly now what we're told is that we have to be placed into boxes and adapt. No. There's a group that got together last week, a few days ago, here at LUMA. I would like to thank LUMA, in particular, and Maya Hoffman for allowing us to work together in residency. A writing workshop that was led by Martin. And there was Sébastien Dutreuil, a specialist, the history of sciences, a new type of sciences that came about 15 or so years ago, to integrate all sorts of knowledges available anywhere and integrate them into one single system. And he studied how things could be articulated with a set of theories called the Gaia theory. Gaia as a living element, including everything. Then we had a geologist in our group, Jérôme Gaillardet, and the Collège des Bernardins in Paris created a position to teach geography, and we held a seminar. And we do something quite unique, which is we have a seminar in which we have philosophers, geologists, geographists, climatologists discuss matters together. We're faced with the same problem. Can we understand human societies by reintroducing the material aspect? And Bruno Latour, whom you're familiar with, and Natasha Martin, whose a pupil, Philippe Descola, looked at how other people, more so-called primitive people, think or recompose the relationship between nature and culture, between human beings and non-human beings. And I'm an environment historian. So we worked all together during the workshop in residency here. And this is an idea that I put forward and I suggested to Bruno Latour, which was the following, to say, well, what if we wrote or put together a geography book? We have a name for it. I won't jump the gun, but anyway, let's write a geography book or geography manual. No, I'm not going to give the name. No, I'm not entitled to give you the name. I don't want to spoil the surprise. Let's write a geography manual for high school students. So this would be a manual of geography. That wouldn't be a geography of space and of flows completely dry, that has to do with economic globalization. No, we want a manual of geography that is not the same as it used to be before, but is more rooted, more material. The two conditions that are very new, there are two circumstances. And there's a new geology that is emerging, and this is what Jérôme Gaillardet is studying. It's a geography of critical areas, and this is something that is quite fascinating, because in the previous geographical model that I submitted to you, it was a geography of the ground and the different forms, geomorphology, but the soil was not described, the subsoil, the soil, whatever. And there were the major elements, the mountains, the rivers, the reef, generally speaking. It was like an anatomical model, saying like the soil is the anatomical description, then there's physiology with the explanation of humans and the interaction between both, like a social morphology. So, globally saying, what is interesting is that it didn't work too well in the past because the ground was stable, wouldn't move, and then there were people that were studied like little pods on the ground, and to see how they interacted and how they work, we looked at the correlation with the ground. So the type or the shape of villages, the types or the style of homes, and how roads were built, and that didn't really work. And the new element, I thought I had a timer. Sorry, I don't know how much time I have left. But anyway, now the critical areas are areas in movement. It is a science looking at the very thin layer where life and all kinds and forms of life is concentrated, including the soil, the subsoil, and part of the atmosphere. And there are permanent exchanges between those different layers and elements. This geography of critical areas shows us that we're not familiar of the underground circulation of water, that we don't know about the different processes. We concentrated on the different nodes, the crossing points, but we have a common element: the timeline and the different timelines for different layers. And we have to look at the movements and different cycles. And then there's a change in our cosmology. The Earth today doesn't have the same properties as before. And we look at the way in which the Earth has produced the conditions for people to live on it, and how the conditions for life to emerge have developed. So when it's no longer us humans doing what we want with our Earth, but us humans being part and parcel of a system. What we'll be able to do with this new geography and possibly with the new manual, let me show you a project that tried to solve the problem, but wasn't a real success. It is still in mine, but I'm going to give, and it's the project Les Archives de la Planète by Albert Kahn, 1909-1931. It's the largest collection of autochrome plates in the world, and Albert Kahn sent photographers all over the world to take pictures of the world and the disappearing spaces or places in the world. And so those are the only photographies of those times. Albert Kahn did this is a Jew from the region of Alsace in the northeast of France who had made a fortune in mining, and he had a problem is looking at the coexistence between human societies with the increasing nationalism. And he wanted to look about the connection between the soil, the ground, and human societies. He mentioned Bergson, and he hired Jean Brun, who was the first one to teach human geography in Lausanne, Switzerland, in 1907, and he created this in the Collège de France in 1921, the equivalent. Brun looked at the scientific program of operators sent all over the world, and they were told, you need to photograph the different impact of destructive economy of animals and of plants. And I won't tell you about all sorts of elements like the Rauer Bierschaft and his brother, but they're going to classify, or those who are sent out all over the world are going to classify the world according to 3 classes or types, and they can look at houses and pathways, and if you look at what they came up with, it doesn't really match the brief. Albert Kahn had a news agency. He had a property in Boulogne, outside of Paris, where he looked at the different types of vegetation and how it grew. And he tried to understand the life of different societies. And there's also the famous garden, the Albert Kahn Garden in Paris. His garden was a political project that is similar to what I just described, is that he tried to have coexist, tried to reconcile the different natures by putting together different types of vegetation that each country had. And so you had pine forests from Northern America, trees from the Vosges region in France with sandstone blocks that were brought from the Vosges region to that, and then an English garden and a Japanese garden, but it didn't work too well. And Albert Kahn was ruined by the crisis in 1929, and then there was an increase in different nationalism, and it went about. So this is a project that wasn't a success, but was based on the same ideas, and you can see the strength or the power that it generated. There's one that is missing in Albert Kahn's Keeling, is the deep Gothic German forest. And my last slide is to show you that there's another philosophical project that wasn't really a success. It's the philosophical garden of enlightenment, and that's what Kahn was talking about. There was a craze at the time to have or to create philosophical gardens. You have one in Chambourcy, the Désert de Ré. You can see the tower here, the famous tower. The Count of Montville used to inhabit the tower, which was a circular tower that Nicolas Ledoux mentioned. And you have a hermit, you have a pyramid, you have a Tartar tent, and this is the utopia of the coexistence of different cultures, different civilizations brought together. In this writing workshop that we did in residency, it's not really a surprise that we did it here at LUMA, because to create a new geography, you have to have a location that can host people thinking about how to live together in a new environment. And it's the power, or it's the ability to explain our environment that we've lost, because geography today has become something mathematical, where nothing is described nor explained. And thank you for your attention.
Alors, merci beaucoup.
Merci. Mon micro marche pas. Ah, voilà.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gregory Quenet, for this great statement. We got a time to field one question. You want to ask one question from the audience. I'm looking at the audience. Jean-Baptiste, Carol, we're going to bring you a roving mic, and I'm going to hold the mic for you because you're wearing a mask. Quite interesting, Gregory. Now, you said geography, thought about soil. Since the end of the 19th century, between the anti-war period, the issue of erosion, exhaustion of soil and land is studied by a lot of American scientists. You got disciplines publishing the erosion of science, agronomics. What about the interaction between human societies and soil? It's like the climate change, namely the problems of drop in nutrients. These were issues way back when, since the 19th century and 19th century. Why are geographers in France, but not only, do they have any blinkers? Are they blind? Or do they ignore all this? Vogt Osborne, are publishing books selling in the millions. Are French geographers totally blind? Do they have blinkers? This geography, which is academic, I'm talking about the geography, the project by Vidal de la Blache in 1870, is prevailing in the 1900s and will start getting exhausted in the 60s for many reasons. The fragmentation, you've got phenomena which we're not able to pinpoint what you're talking about, basically, and it continued routinely because you've got a framework which was devoid of its substance. Maurice Poulanou, whom you don't know, I guess, whose books I read over the summer, who had the chair of geography at Collège de France. You can see how there's an effort to create a kind of the geography of humankind, but he cannot do it. His last book is moving away from the territory. He explains how, as a geographer, you've got I don't like freeways, I don't like trains disturbing the ordering set up by 1,000 years of French history. It's the history of the nation, which is striking when I hear people talk, when you talk about the way in which you're disconnected from the soil, how you destroyed, you're not able to use or milk or wool, whatever. It's something quite recent, since the end of the 70s. And we're unable to come back and revisit things and understand why collectively, as a group, we wanted to undo the ties, the links, to have a different type of dwelling. The only books I know about this are books written by the Americans. You need an American to look from the outside and understand what's happening in France. Hence the Edgar Morin example. It's interesting until the end of the 50s. And Le Lanoux, the first book he wrote, he is a son of a teacher in Brittany. He is a professor at Collège de France. He wrote a book with his father. It's a handbook for the primary school kids, 300 pages. 300 pages to learn on geography. You learn geography of France and its colonies. In 1967, the book was geography of France and of the countries that speak French. You talked about the geography of the Tonkin or Indochina or Africa. There's a kind you want to progress. There was a kind of disorganization of a type of awareness, as shown by your presentation. The connection between development of mathematics, of knowledge, which is leading to a loss of connection to the soil, to the ground, to the geography. Now we have a next speaker. Let us